culture, religion, and irreligion. Galileo, Spinoza, Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Bertrand Russell. Show me a society that's ever adopted those values as its own. That's fallen into famine, dictatorship, war, cruelty, and persecution, and then we'll have a level playing field. But for now, thank you. I was going to say, hold your applause. No, applaud more. That actually, I think, will do for an introduction. If you don't know where I'm coming from by now, you're never going to know. It's your turn, and I'm enormously, I really mean enormously grateful that you came. Thank you. I wonder if someone else would like to point to questioners, just so you don't think I've planted anyone in the audience. But who would that be? Do I have a volunteer just to identify a questioner?
Basically, my question is that
Could you speak up a bit?
Sure.
I don't have to
American society, probably it's considered a little bit more than Europe, is a society that faces tremendous flux and has for a long, long time. And I was wondering if that is perhaps one reason why you've cited in your book that American society is especially religious. I mean, it struck me that societies in flux, having to deal with that tremendous change, do people turn to religion as an antidote to that change? And if so, that what sorts of things can, not leaning on religion, what sorts of things can we do to substitute for religion in dealing with lots of change?
Well, I think you're partly right, and I think Alexis de Tocqueville had it right also when he pointed out that the great thing about America is religion is a voluntary association. You can't be made to go to a church here. The government can't finance one. I mean, where I was born, which you can probably tell was in England, the Queen is the head of the church, as well as of the armed forces and the state. And on her demise, the instant of her decease, her slobbering, chinless dauphin of a son will not only become the head of the state and the armed forces, but the head of the Church of England. It's enough to make a cat laugh, isn't it? And I have to pay taxes, or would if I still lived there, have to pay taxes to it. That's what you get when you found a church on the family values of fucking Henry VIII. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, take it from someone who had to sweat and struggle to become a citizen here and go through Homeland Security and the National Security Agency. Realize how lucky you are. That doesn't apply to you. Someone who wants to build a church here has to do it themselves and keep it going by their own efforts. And fine, let them by all means do that, as long as they agree to leave the rest of us alone. Now, on the point that you make about anomie, or if you prefer alienation, that was the same point that Durkheim made very early on in his studies of these matters. A huge number of people in history are always having to make something like the transition from the country to the city, from the stable, ordered, rhythmic life that's determined by the seasons to the much more feral conditions of mass society, and that means many more lives will have to be experienced as failures, or at least as very risky. My comprehension of this issue slightly stops there. What I've never understood, and it may be a failure of my imagination, is in what respect does belief in the tooth fairy help you at that point? After all, millions and millions of intelligent workers shrugging off the city, shrugging off the idiocy of rural life and moving to the city, have not run straight to a priest when they run into a crisis. I don't see why people do it. I'm not sure that the explanation we give isn't a condescending one, which, if I'm not babbling too much about this, would enable me to answer another question from my interlocutor that I failed to. What about how when religion makes people behave better? What about Dr. Martin Luther King? That's the one I always get asked. Shall I answer it now? It seems logical. Dr. King was an exemplary human being by every standard that I know. I can't be sure that he was actually a Christian. I can be grateful to the extent that he was not one, in that when he told his oppressed people that he was going to preach from the book of Exodus, about the story of the enslaved who made it to the promised land, it's a very good thing he didn't mean it, because that horrible story says that the tribe he's leading are allowed, empowered in fact, ordered by God to kill everyone who gets in their way, rape their women, massacre their children, sparing only the females of marriageable age, and steal the land and the property of any tribe they don't destroy, or do. Well, just as well that isn't what he was saying, right? Second, you'll remember that he was a student of Marx and of Hegel, and he was regularly accused, rightly too, in his lifetime by the FBI and by the reactionary bigots, of keeping too many friendships among communists and Marxists and socialists, which he did. Great black secularists now forgotten, like Bayard Rustin, my favorite American socialist, and Philip Randolph, the great American black trade unionist, actually organized the March on Washington, had the idea, pulled the crowds together, brought in the trade unions to make it happen. It's a pity that we leave these people out of account, and I think it's condescending, because I think that 90% of the white liberals in this country are in effect saying in a patronizing manner, well, you know, these black folks, they quite like a preacher. They like a preacher man, that's what they respond to. They like the pulpit. That's what they go for. So why not let them have it? Which immediately gives permission for the most gross charlatans and frauds who I've been debating in the last few months, like Sharpton and Jackson, to come forward and just pick it up as if it was theirs, with your, as it were, permission, and prove yet again that you can get away with anything in this country if you can put Reverend in front of your name. I guess we should just do it alternately, yeah.
Your book was reviewed in New Yorker, and the reviewer brought up a point I thought you might like to address, if you haven't already, that if your view is, would the world be better off without religion at all, he brought up the point that if we're wicked enough to invent religion for ourselves, then we're wicked enough to come up with some other alternative that's just as mischievous.
True enough. I mean, did everyone get the question? Okay. Well, you know why atheists are to be pitied, don't you? They have no one to talk to when receiving a blowjob. So, that if I'm asked, do I wish that religion would die out of the world, I sort of reply, no, I wouldn't have anyone to argue with. I mean, it is, after all, it is the original argument. Where religion ends, philosophy begins, just as where phony cosmological myths end, physics begins. So you have to know what the origins of the argument are. And religion is our first and worst attempt to find out what's going on. We only bother with it because it was here first. It grabbed the territory of explanation, because we are pattern-seeking mammals. We need to look for patterns and for logic, and we prefer, even in times like this, many people will prefer a conspiracy explanation to no theory at all, because they need to have some explanation. Well, religion comes from the time when we didn't know there was a germ theory to explain disease. So it was plague, it was God's will, and a curse. Didn't know we lived on a round planet. Didn't know there were round celestial bodies. Didn't know that our DNA makes us kin with other animals and indeed plants. So the study of it and the debate with it, I think, has to go on. To that extent, I'm in favor of, as the President ludicrously says, teaching the argument about evolution. Because the way I learned it was by reading about the confrontation between Huxley and Wilberforce in London, about the origin of species. Actually, it was in Oxford, in the origin of species. Huxley was Wilberforce's opponent. Wilberforce was the Bishop of Oxford. Huxley was Darwin's best friend, the man who coined the term agnostic. They had a great debate, and Huxley mopped the floor with the spokesman of the church. That's how I know how the argument goes. And in America, admittedly, 50 years later, good grief, but still, the same argument happens in Tennessee, in a courtroom this time. and the gain they lose. By all means, teach the argument in that way. You just can't teach it